Official report. SLS Panic Investigation. Confidential. Psycho Patrol internal use only. Officer. Case status. Resolved? Sir, I regret to inform you that in the process of investigating the SLS Panic, I have executed 47 civilians, destroyed 3 apartment complexes, incurred 350,000 euros in ammunition expenses, transformed Harness Lunk into a horse, and identified you as a fraud using fake science to consolidate power. I assure you, this was all necessary to complete the mission. I wasn't supposed to turn that businessman into a horse. That wasn't in my mission brief. I was investigating shampoo ingredients, for Christ's sake. But there I stood, watching his daughter pet her father's horrifically distorted equine form, cooing about how she finally got her very own horse. Well, he stared back at me with eyes that screamed, "I used to have thumbs."
Where are my thumbs?
And somehow, this was considered a successful mission outcome. I got a promotion. Welcome to Psycho Patrol R, the game that shattered my perception of reality more effectively than the psycho hazards I was supposedly policing. Pan-Europa, this dystopian setting where our adventure takes place, is a bureaucratic hellscape where the European Federal Police have evolved beyond mere physical crimes to policing thought itself. Psycho hazards are essentially thought crimes that have gained enough momentum to infect the collective consciousness. A concept that feels like Orwell and Philip K. Dick had a baby, then raised it exclusively on corporate memos and energy drinks. The entire governmental structure seems designed to generate as much paperwork as possible, while solving absolutely nothing, which makes your role as a V-Stalker pilot all the more absurd. You're essentially the blunt instrument they send in when filing forms in triplicate fails to stop mental contagion. Consumer Softproducts follow-up to Cruelty Squad doesn't just break the mold, it liquefies the mold, injects it into your eyeballs, and convinces you that's how games are supposed to work. Pan-Europa is a dystopian nightmare where law enforcement means piloting a V-Stalker mech through toxic swamps and brutalist architecture, while accumulating debt for each bullet you fire, and occasionally forcing citizens to undergo species reassignment surgery. Let's address the Cruelty Squad-shaped elephant in the room. For the uninitiated, Cruelty Squad was Ville Kalilo's nightmarish corporate mercenary simulator. A game where you play as a disposable assassin for the Cruelty Squad, taking contracts to eliminate targets in environments that look like someone vomited a 90s website onto a 3D engine. It featured mechanics like the Grapendix, a literal intestinal grappling hook, fishing for cybernetically enhanced fish you could then implant into your body, and a stock market where you could invest in companies whose CEOs you just assassinated. The game was acclaimed by critics and YouTubers for its scathing critique of late-stage capitalism, wrapped in an aesthetic that can only be described as deliberately hostile to human perception. The textures writhe and stretch, the UI looks like it was designed by a committee of corporate sociopaths on ketamine, and the sound design makes you feel like you're inside a malfunctioning dial-up modem. I never finished it, few people have. Cruelty Squad sits firmly in third place for games with fandoms that have almost never interacted with the source material, just behind Mouthwashing and Pathologic. The more takes you have on Cruelty Squad, and the louder you are about them, the less likely you are to have made it past pharmacokinetics. I tried to play it, God knows, I did try. But after around 40 minutes, my brain was actively trying to escape through my eye sockets. The motion sickness was so intense I thought I was going to vomit colors that don't exist in our visible spectrum. It was like someone had fed a corporate training video, a medical textbook, and several gigs of cursed GIFs into an AI, then projected the results directly onto my cerebral cortex. I should take a moment to mention that immersive sims and I have a complicated relationship. Games like Deus Ex, Dishonored, and Prey demand a level of environmental awareness and systemic thinking that my brain struggles to process. When most players see interlocking systems and creative possibilities, I see overwhelming options and inevitable failure. These games ask you to be methodical, observant, and strategic. Three qualities I lack entirely when given a virtual gun and minimal supervision. My approach to stealth sections in these games can best be described as a bull in a china shop who also accidentally bought a grenade launcher. My attempts at hacking usually end with alarms blaring and security forces wondering how I managed to set a computer on fire. And my understanding of multiple paths to victory typically results in me trying to brute force the most direct route while ignoring all the carefully designed alternatives. When Psycho Patrol R was announced, I approached it like someone who'd been mauled by a bear, considering a second date. Maybe this time will be different, I thought, ignoring the primal part of my brain screaming, "The last one hurt us." And somehow, against all odds, I found myself not just playing, but enjoying this fever dream simulator. Don't get me wrong, I still died approximately 600 fucking times. I still accumulated more debt than a liberal arts major with a cocaine habit. I still accidentally killed so many quest givers that my personal body count rivals several mid-sized military conflicts. But I kept going back. There's something uniquely compelling about a game that refuses to hold your hand, then chops your hand off when you reach for help, then charges you for the medical expense, then promotes you for reducing unnecessary appendages in the workplace. Over the hours I spent with Psycho Patrol R, I slaughtered an entire apartment building because it seemed more efficient than knocking, encountered a polyhedron-shaped entity in a sewer that may have been a god, a glitch, or both, discovered that the entire SLS Panic investigation was a bureaucratic power grab. And yes, I turned a man into a horse for his daughter's birthday. It's worth noting that at $40 for an early access title, Psycho Patrol R is asking for a significant investment. The current build does feel substantial. There's a complete main questline, numerous side activities, and enough content to justify the price tag if you're willing to embrace the particular brand of madness. However, some areas clearly feel unfinished, with NPCs literally telling you they're works in progress. The game systems are robust but occasionally buggy, and there's a sense that some mechanics could use further refinement. Still, unlike many early access titles that feel like glorified demos, there's a complete vision here. It's just a vision that might give you nightmares. I'm still not sure if I played the game correctly or if there even is a correct way to play. Perhaps the true psychohazard was the friends we murdered along the way. So grab your V-Stalker manual, empty your bank account in preparation for ammunition expenses, and join me as I document how Psycho Patrol R systematically dismantled my sanity with all the precision of a drunk surgeon with a shotgun. This isn't a review, it's a post-mortem of my cognitive functions. Let's dive in, shall we? Just remember, in Pan-Europa, the police don't serve and protect. They kill you and rummage through your wallet for spare change. So, you've made it past the introduction and decided to willingly subject yourself to Psycho Patrol R. Let me walk you through what to expect when you first boot up this fever dream of a game. Instead of a traditional character creator where you adjust sliders to determine the exact angle of your cheekbones, Psycho Patrol R gives you 6 pre-built starter classes to choose from, each with their own distinct looks. Recruit, Warrior Cop, SWAT, Detective, Carabinier, and Specialist. Each comes with different starting equipment and stat distributions that drastically affect your early game experience. Being a man of refined tastes and limited imagination, I went with Warrior Cop. This gave me a 12-gauge shotgun that looks suspiciously like a Spaz 12, and a 50 caliber hand cannon that could probably take down a small aircraft. My stats included high health, whatever that means in a game where most enemies can turn you into ground beef with 2 shots, and decent-ish body armor. The real selling point, however, was the starter packages of HE grenades and grade A cocaine. Nothing says responsible law enforcement quite like snorting a line before storming into a civilian apartment with high explosives. The game starts you off in the Psycho Patrol HQ, which serves as your home base. It's a brutalist nightmare of concrete and fluorescent lighting that would make Soviet architects proud. This is where you'll receive your assignments, upgrade your equipment, and connect with your fellow officers, assuming you haven't accidentally shot them yet. After talking to our boss Lorenzo, we receive our first task, and it seems simple. Investigate a psychohazard related to sodium lauryl sulfate. If you think that sounds suspiciously like an ingredient in shampoo, you're right, And that's just the beginning of the surreal conspiracies you'll uncover. I immediately failed this mission by getting lost in the HQ for 45 minutes, during which time I discovered I could use the messenger app on my character's phone to harass various NPCs. Truth Zone informed me that eating eggs will boost my cholesterol levels sky high. I called Eclipse Commander a limp-dicked little beta male just because I could. And someone called Cis Bitch threatened to commit suicide if I asked for my password again. So I asked for my password again. This was all before I even stepped outside. When I finally did make it out of HQ, I was immediately presented with the game's most crucial decision. Do I stay on foot or do I enter my V-Stalker? Both options come with pros and cons that the game never explicitly tells you about, but just expects you to figure out through trial and error. On foot, you're basically a walking kick me sign. Almost anything can kill you in 1 or 2 hits, at least at the start. However, you can enter buildings, interact with NPCs without terrifying them, usually, and perform more delicate tasks like bribing officials. In your V-Stalker, you're a walking tank. Emphasis on walking because these things handle like shopping trolleys with 3 broken wheels. The controls seem deliberately clunky, which I assume is meant to simulate piloting a several-ton mechanical monstrosity. Your firepower is tremendous, but so is the bill you receive for every bullet fired. This is where Psycho Patrol R's economy becomes apparent. Unlike Cruelty Squad, where you could eventually game the stock market to become obscenely wealthy, Psycho Patrol R seems determined to keep you perpetually broke. The cost of the ammo you use comes directly out of your pocket. Die repeatedly trying to complete the same mission? Each death compounds your debt as your ammunition use accumulates across attempts. Ville has managed to create a game where the true horror isn't the enemies or the psycho hazards. It's your financial statement at the end of the day. I've never felt more stressed from a video game than watching my bank account plummet into the negatives after a particularly disastrous firefight, where I panic-fired my entire ammunition reserves into what turned out to be a harmless bystander. Speaking of bystanders, let's talk about the NPCs. Psycho Patrol R's world is populated by some of the most bizarre and unsettling characters I've ever encountered in a game. Everyone seems to be operating on different frequencies of reality. Have a conversation with a street vendor and they might start rambling about orgone energy, or how their agricultural permit was denied 3 years in a row. Try to arrest someone for spreading psycho-hazardous content and they'll accuse you of working for Big Egg. One of the most bizarrely entertaining aspects of Psycho Patrol R is its conversation system. Unlike most RPGs nowadays, where dialogue options are limited to yes, no, tell me more, and I'll murder your entire bloodline, this game lets you ask NPCs about a truly deranged assortment of topics. Ask about politics and you'll frequently hear Pan-Europa citizens debating the critical question of UK, to annex or to nuke. In my completely fabricated and wildly exaggerated interpretation of these conversations, citizens suggest stuff like, annexation is too risky, have you seen what they eat over there? While others advocate for precision tactical nukes, just to clear out the fog a bit. I'm pretty sure one NPC was just making cricket noises while pantomiming pushing a button. After all, we can't let the psycho-hazard of Birmingham escape from the Isles. Bring up selective breeding and responses range from dismissive, that's so 20th century, to disturbing enthusiasm. One scientist in the R&D department launched into a 15-minute monologue about using CRISPR to create humans with built-in cup holders. Some of them didn't happen, but it's pretty funny. These conversations aren't just bizarre flavor text. They actually help build your understanding of this twisted world, and occasionally provide useful information or unlock side quests. I spent 3 hours just wandering around talking to people about their thoughts on recreational substances, only to accidentally stumble upon information about a psycho-hazard investigation. Of course, I immediately shot the informant out of reflex, but still, progress. The moment-to-moment gameplay is a disorientating blend of talking to people, trying to make sense of their schizophrenic ramblings, trying not to get turned into paste by literally everyone, and engaging in armored combat that feels like I'm trying to drive a particularly rowdy trolley. One moment you're carefully analyzing clues from someone clearly on several mind-altering substances, the next you're engaged in a V-Stalker fight across the murder bridge, and then suddenly you're haggling with a man who may or may not be a physical manifestation of a psycho-hazard over the price of some cocaine. This constant shifting of gears can be jarring, but it creates a unique rhythm that feels distinctly different from Cruelty Squad's more straightforward infiltration gameplay. The open world structure means you're never quite sure what's around the next corner. It could be your next objective, a valuable resource, or a heavily armed lunatic who will reduce you to a fine red mist before you can even register what's happening. And that's just the first hour of gameplay. Trust me, it gets weirder from here. After finally finding my way out of the police station, a process that involved kicking down every available door, accidentally discharging my firearm in the bathroom, and getting so lost I briefly questioned if I was in a non-Euclidean space, I made it outside. The fresh air of Pan-Europa hit my lungs, carrying with it the distinct aroma of urban decay, psychohazardous waste, and whatever the hell the average Pan-Europan citizen smells like. Directly across from the Psycho Patrol HQ was a block of apartments, which the game told me contained my personal living space. Of course, rather than go straight there like a normal functioning member of society, I decided to test the limits of this simulation by breaking into a random apartment. Inside, I found a panicked man who, upon seeing me, a heavily armed police officer who had just violently entered his home, immediately started telling me his life story. He owed 12,000 credits to some loan shark called Goretrek down at the docks and was desperate for help. This was clearly a side quest, a meaningful narrative thread designed to humanize the world and provide moral complexity to my journey. So naturally, I blew his head off with my 50 caliber hand cannon. To my surprise and delight, he was carrying 15,000 credits on his person. That's right, this desperate man claiming to be in crippling debt was walking around with 25% more money than he supposedly owed. Capitalism, baby! This was a defining moment in my Psycho Patrol R experience. Not the wanton murder, but the realization that everyone in this world is lying to me and stuffed with cash like particularly lucrative piñatas. Emboldened by this discovery, I immediately broke into the apartment across the hall and executed its occupant as well. Another 15 grand! At this point, I was making better hourly wages than a hedge fund manager. I continued my crime spree upstairs, breaking into the apartment opposite mine and liquidating its residents. He dropped a sniper rifle that would prove invaluable in making future combat encounters go from annoying as fuck to still annoying as fuck, but at least I have a sniper rifle. Finally, I decided to check out my own apartment. The bed featured some of the ugliest textures I've ever seen in a modern video game, like it was upholstered with screenshots of early 2000s Flash website backgrounds. Also, I forgot to mention, but downstairs in the apartment of the first guy, there was a reference to Serial Experiments Lane on the wall because, of course there was. This game is legally required to reference at least 3 pieces of cryptic Japanese media per square kilometer. Having committed enough felonies to qualify for my own Wikipedia page, I decided it was time to actually do something productive. I hopped into my V-Stalker and decided to head downtown to find the loan shark. This is when I discovered that downtown Pan-Europa is essentially a war zone, crawling with enemy combatants both on foot and in their own V-Stalkers. The on-foot enemies were particularly amusing. There's something genuinely hilarious about watching some poor schmuck with a pistol shooting at your several-ton mechanical killing machine, their bullets pinging harmlessly off your armor like hail on a tank. I would almost feel bad for them if I wasn't too busy turning them into a fine red mist. The enemy V-Stalkers, however, required actual strategy. Taking them head-on led to me being turned into Swiss cheese faster than I could say, "Oh look, I appear to be experiencing rapid onset body perforation syndrome." But with a bit of finesse, and by finesse I mean hiding around corners and ambushing them, I managed to fight my way through. One particularly satisfying encounter involved me getting the drop on a light tank, which exploded in a shower of parts, including a rotary cannon that I immediately added to my growing collection of instruments of destruction. It's like Christmas, except instead of gifts under a tree, it's military hardware among the viscera. Moving deeper into downtown, I came across an apartment complex that I proceeded to storm through like a particularly eager player in Call of Duty's No Russian mission. In one apartment, I found an extremely loud music player that was grating on my last nerve, so I turned it off. Surprisingly, this inadvertently completed a quest I hadn't even accepted yet. In the building next door, a businessman, after I cut through his security detail, thanked me for silencing the music and offered me a reward. I accepted said reward, then promptly decorated his walls with his brain matter. Efficiency! Another notable encounter was with a businessman living in a tiny, squalid apartment. who claimed to be broke when I talked to him. His home contained nothing but a mattress on the floor, the very picture of destitution. When I inevitably shot him, because at this point, why stop, he exploded like a loot pinata, dropping over 20 cups of espresso and high-grade cocaine all over the floor. So that's where all his money went. Mystery solved through ballistics. In the center of this downtown area stood a manor guarded by 2 V-stalkers that were clearly above my pay grade. Even my newly acquired confidence in rotary cannon wasn't quite enough to take them on. So I did what any reasonable person would do and went in the opposite direction, which led me to the necropolis. Let me be clear about the necropolis. Fuck this place. The necropolis is a dead zone, dominated by a gloomy atmosphere and a massive black structure in the center that screams, nothing good happens here. I don't know if I missed some crucial item or strategy, but I spent about an hour trying to clear this place out. I learned enemy spawn patterns through painful repetition, died more times than I can count, and finally managed to eliminate every hostile entity in the area. My reward? Absolutely fucking nothing. I did find a terminal behind a breached door that gave me a password for a basement door that I couldn't locate anywhere. The whole experience felt like being trapped in a particularly sadistic escape room, designed by someone who hates you personally. And then, just when I thought the necropolis couldn't get any stranger, I stumbled upon what appeared to be a sewer entrance in the streets. Against my better judgment, which, let's be honest, had already taken a permanent fucking holiday, I dropped down into it and found myself in a cramped long chamber. Immediately, the music cut out completely. No ambient sounds, no background noise, nothing, just dead silence. There, floating in the darkness in the distance, was some kind of polyhedron-shaped entity that bullets seemed to phase right through. I emptied an entire magazine into it without effect. As it drifted closer to me, the camera started bugging out, glitching and distorting as if reality itself was unraveling. The closer it got, the worse it became, until it was practically engulfing me while slowly draining my health. Was this an actual enemy? A psychohazard? A debug room that wasn't supposed to be accessible? Or was this just Vile's way of saying, you thought you understood what was happening? That's cute. Whatever it was, it confirmed that the necropolis wasn't just difficult. It was strange as fuck in ways I couldn't begin to comprehend. Interestingly, there were multiple builders in high visibility jackets throughout the necropolis, telling me the area was a work in progress. In any other game, I'd assume this was a fourth wall breaking indicator of unfinished content, but in Psycho Patrol R, where reality is as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake, I genuinely couldn't tell if this was a bit, or if the area was actually incomplete. Such is the mindfuck that is this game. Realizing I was clearly on the wrong path to find the dogs, I retreated and took the right path instead of the left this time. Eventually finding myself at a bridge known as the Bridge of the Sovereign, but I like to refer to as the Murder Bridge. An ominous name, but I was beyond caring at this point. After all, what's the worst that could happen? Despite its ominously given name, Murder Bridge turned out to be something of a letdown in the murder department, at least for me. Maybe it was the rotary cannon I'd picked up earlier, or maybe it was my newfound expertise of piloting my mechanical death machine, but I cut through the enemy mechs on the bridge with surprising ease. I was almost disappointed. When you name something Murder Bridge, there are certain expectations. Making my way across the clearly unstable remnants of the bridge, sections of which were missing entirely, requiring some delicate navigation, I arrived at the docks. This is where I could finally continue the quest that started this whole adventure. Despite the fact that the quest giver was now missing most of his head, the side quest must go on. The docks area was dominated by what appears to be a massive apartment complex, though fortified compound might be a more accurate description. The place was guarded by multiple mechs and enough troops to qualify as a small militia. It was the kind of security setup that screams, "Nothing suspicious happening here, officer. Please move along." Before I could decide on the best approach to storm this fortress, I spotted someone in a suit standing just beyond the vision of the guards. Curious, I approached and was met by a representative from the Pan-European Committee on something or other. I just made that up, but she explained that her partner had gone into the apartment complex over 24 hours ago and hadn't come out yet. And would I be so kind as to check it out? Well, since I was planning to go in there and commit wholesale slaughter anyway, I figured I might as well keep an eye out for a missing partner. Multitasking is the key to efficient law enforcement. After several attempts and several deaths that added to my already crippling debt, I managed to clear out the ground floor of the apartment complex. However, the upper floors proved too challenging even for my trigger-happy approach. The enemies were tougher, more numerous, and kept flanking me in ways that suggested they had actual combat training. I made a mental note to return later, preferably with more firepower or fewer functioning brain cells. Moving on, I finally located the bar where my original target was supposed to be hanging out. I approached through the front entrance because subtlety is for people who don't have rotary cannons, and proceeded to clear out yet another militia's worth of shotgun-wielding goons. These guys really needed to work on their recruitment strategy. They were burning through personnel faster than a fast food restaurant during the 2008 financial crisis. Working my way upstairs, I eliminated more guards until I reached what appeared to be a meeting room. Inside was my target, the loan shark, along with two random businessmen who I can only assume were there to provide moral support or potentially serve as human shields. Neither approach worked out well for them. I engaged the loan shark in conversation, partly because I was curious what he had to say and partly because I was reloading. He offered cooperation if I were to take out a witness currently in Psycho Patrol protective custody. The irony of a Psycho Patrol officer being asked to assassinate someone under Psycho Patrol protection was not lost on me, but before I could appreciate it fully, I'd already blown his head off. To my delight, he dropped 100,000 euros. That's capitalism, baby. The invisible hand of the market was already giving me a high five. Despite the fact that the loan shark was now significantly shorter by exactly one head, I decided I still had a job to do. The witness assassination had gone from being a negotiation point to a personal mission. Not because I felt any obligation to honor an agreement with a corpse, but because the idea of infiltrating my own organization's protective custody program to murder a witness seemed like exactly the kind of absurd challenges this game is built for. With a sense of purpose and approximately 145,000 ill-gotten euros, I headed back to HQ, assassination plots forming in my mind. Would I face moral quandaries about betraying my oath as an officer? Would my conscience trouble me as I planned to murder someone whose only crime was witnessing another crime? Nah, in the words of the greatest philosopher of our time, I'm just here for a good time. With witness assassination on my mind, I returned to HQ to locate my target. Finding them turned out to be a relatively straightforward endeavor. Inside what appeared to be a Psycho Patrol locker room was a door guarded by two operatives decked out in premium armor and wielding fully automatic shotguns. Nothing quite says nothing to see here, quite like enough firepower to reduce a rhinoceros to paste. These weren't regular Psycho Patrol officers like me. They belonged to the Anti-Cocaine Task Force, a separate wing of Psycho Patrol. This organizational distinction meant I could slaughter them with abandon without any consequences. At least, no consequences beyond the immediate and extremely painful ones they would inflict with their shotguns. And let me tell you, this section makes the necropolis look like a daycare center. These anti-cocaine operatives could lay you out faster than a Wagner conscript on the front lines of Ukraine, and to add insult to injury, they could only be killed by headshots due to their insane armor. That's right, center mass shots, limb shots, even shots to the groin, which I tried out of desperation, did nothing. It was headshots or highway to hell, except if you use a machine gun from like the V-Stalker, that tends to do it pretty well, but then you're like really slow, so yeah. I kept hitting my head against this wall again and again and again. Now some of you may say, bro, just get better armor and upgrade your stats, to which I would respond, I would, had I not blown through all my money on some stats, some mech upgrades, and the sheer amount of ammo the rotary cannon uses. By this point I was sitting 22,000 euros in debt, with nothing to show for it except an intimate knowledge of what the inside of my own head looks like when it's splattered across a wall. The process was nothing short of psychological torture. I'd get through the first guards, only to get shot in the back by a turret I hadn't noticed. I'd clear that section, only to get instantly pasted the second I walked through a door. I tried sneaking through the ventilation system, which worked right up until I popped out of a vent and missed my one and only shot on a guard's head before getting turned into a fine red mist. In one particularly frustrating attempt, I cleared out the entire bottom floor, feeling like I'd finally gotten the hang of this section, only to walk past a corner I swear I'd already cleared and get turned into ground beef. It was like the game was inserting enemies behind me out of sheer spite. After what felt like the 100th attempt, I finally cleared out one section of the facility, triumphantly making my way upstairs to find Absolutely nothing. No witness, just empty rooms and the crushing realization that I'd wasted hours of my life for nothing. So I came back downstairs to explore a different path, and you guessed it, I got killed again. Woohoo! The cycle of violence and resurrection continued like some twisted Groundhog Day, where instead of learning to be a better person, I was just learning the exact pixel-perfect position to stand in not to get my head blown off. Looking back, I do remember seeing someone upstairs who didn't look like the normal guards, but at that point, I was so tuned to obliterate anything that moved that I instantly took their head off with reckless abandon. Was that the witness? An important NPC? Someone who could have provided crucial information? I will never know, because their head is now decorating the ceiling. Editor's note, it was indeed the witness, and I am just stupid. Thanks. At this point, it dawned on me that I couldn't even check if the quest was completed, because I killed both the quest giver and possibly the target. Quest tracking in Psycho Patrol R seems to be designed around the assumption that players won't immediately murder everyone they meet. An assumption that seems wildly optimistic given the arsenal they provide you with. And then a more troubling thought crossed my mind. Wait, isn't that like a main quest I should be doing? The sodium lauryl sulfate investigation, my actual job, had been completely forgotten in my murderous rampage across Pan-Europa. I was supposed to be investigating psychohazards, not becoming one. But that's the beauty of Psycho Patrol. It gives you a job, sets you loose in a world, full of bizarre characters and situations, and then watches with passive indifference as you completely ignore your responsibilities in favor of creating the Pan-European equivalent of John Wick's body count. The freedom is exhilarating, even if the debt isn't. Plus, who needs a coherent narrative when you have fully automatic shotguns and a V-Stalker? Not this Psycho Patrol officer, that's for sure. Before diving back into the main quest, I decided to return to the docks and give that apartment complex rescue mission another shot. But this time, I thought I'd try something radical. Not immediately opening fire on everything that moved. And surprisingly, it turned out that all those people I'd been treating as hostile combatants were never hostile in the first place. I'd just been firing at them first, which understandably led them to return fire. This realization was a bit of an eye-opener. Had I been the bad guy all along? Was I the psycho hazard? Nah. Couldn't be. They were probably just waiting for me to turn my back before they attacked. Better safe than sorry. With my new don't shoot first approach, I entered the first building, the one on the right labeled 2. The apartment complex was situated up a small slope in an enclosed area with 2 opposing buildings, labeled 1 and 2 respectively. Making my way to the top of building 2, I found the leader of this side of the block, some kind of poor people's collective looking after the residents. The leader offered me a job to kill off the opposing leader across the way. But before making any commitments, I decided to check out the competition. Professional courtesy and all that. The difference between the 2 buildings was like night and day. Compared to the slum-like atmosphere of Building 2, Building 1 felt like a corporate high-rise, complete with an elevator and guards in suits. I met with the leader of this apartment building who, surprise surprise, offered me the exact same deal to clear out the opposing side. As a Psycho Patrol officer with a deep-seated hatred for the economically disadvantaged, I naturally accepted the corporate side's offer. There's something refreshingly honest about naked capitalism compared to the messy reality of community organizing. Plus, the corporate types had better cocaine. Returning to Building 2, I found the mission significantly easier when 50% of the people around weren't trying to kill me, just the 50% I was there to kill. I fought my way to the top and eliminated the enemy leader with surgical precision, which is to say I emptied an entire magazine into them from point-blank range. After collecting my blood money, I discovered a small vent atop a mountain of crates. It led to a big drop, which I navigated using a rappel. At the bottom, I found myself between mines, which fortunately I had some bomb defusal kits for. Following the path onward, I discovered an underground laboratory that would make Joseph Mengele raise an eyebrow. The lab featured cages that made a medieval castle's dungeon look like a 5-star hotel. A naked man furiously typing at a computer, presumably the scientist or researcher, and a healthy dose of guards. I eliminated the guards with my usual subtlety, extreme violence, and approached the naked scientist to retrieve the cage door keys. He refused to hand them over, denying he even had them, so I shot him in the face. Lo and behold, as he dropped to the floor, out came the keys, alongside some cocaine because, of course. Is there anyone in this game who doesn't carry recreational drugs? Using the keys, I opened the cages and found the missing agent, along with another naked man. I first talked to the agent, directing him to escape. He thanked me and gave me 10,000 euros. Good investment on his part. Freedom, and he doesn't get to head removed by bullets. I then spoke to the naked prisoner who asked for my help escaping. Sadly, he had nothing to offer me in return. As my own thoughts helpfully noted in my quest log, without a reward, we cannot help him. The moral compass of a Psycho Patrol officer is guided by profit margins after all. One thing worth mentioning. This naked prisoner was literally invincible. I tried to execute him to put him out of his misery, and definitely not because I'm a completionist who needs to kill everyone. But he just wouldn't die. I shot him, I kicked him, even tried chucking stuff at him, but nothing worked. It's never explained in the game, so I just moved on, but it was quite fucking strange. Maybe he was the real Psycho Hazard all along. With that mystery left unsolved, I returned to the other agency agent outside and turned in the quest. She thanked me and gave me another 5,000 euros. Another job well done. I'd rescued a hostage, made 15,000 euros, and only killed about 20 people in the process. That's what I call efficiency. With my pockets heavier and my conscience no more troubled than usual, I headed back to the downtown area to finally follow up on a lead for the SLS Panic. You know, the actual main quest I was supposed to be doing all along. Maybe this whole doing my job thing might work out after all. So our first proper lead brings us back to the residential downtown area, this time to a smallish locked estate I'd previously ignored. I used my rappel, rapidly becoming my favourite tool, to get over the walls, then promptly murdered all of the security guards who took issue with my trespassing. Inside, I found the son of some rich guy who claims to be a lowlife living off daddy's money. He insists he absolutely doesn't enjoy anime. I'm not that far gone, but this facade collapses instantly when I slide 500 euros across the table. Suddenly he's confessing his love for anime and visual novels like I'm his priest. With his otaku credentials established, he gives me an actual lead. His visual novel form suggests the Psycho Hazard might originate from Gaia Beauty, a natural cosmetic company accessible through the necropolis. Great, back to that hellhole. The Gaia Beauty compound is surprisingly easy to find, just on the outskirts of the necropolis. The place looks like a sleek glass structure with flowing water features and a big tower at the back. Basically what a cosmetics executive thinks heaven looks like after a 3-day cocaine binge. I have to leave my V-Stalker behind, which feels like sending my child to wait in the car, except my child is a several-ton death machine with rotary cannons. Inside, a receptionist directs me to a new arrivals room where I learn I can't access the facility without special security clearance. But there's a deal on the table. Help this employer get a hunting rifle permit processed by Psycho Patrol, and she'll grant me access. I return to the HQ, find the documents room, and, with my typical subtlety, kick open every shelf until the place looks like a paper tornado hit it. I eventually find the permit application on top of the highest shelf, of course, plus 80 other documents I can sell for profit. Bureaucratic theft, the least violent crime I've committed all day. Permit processed, I head back to Gaia Beauty with my new access. I soon encounter what is clearly a boss arena, complete with a fog door made of water, and a V-Stalker that shreds me instantly and is about the size of the Burj Khalifa. Time for plan B. Using a tower overlooking the arena, I snipe 4 rocket launcher guards, then rappel down to a side path. This leads to an elevator that takes me up to whatever the fuck this is. The CEO of Gaia Beauty turns out to be a horrifying flesh amalgamation with multiple heads, each talking in corporate buzzwords while simultaneously saying nothing. Through the babble, I learn Gaia Beauty isn't behind the SLS Panic. It might be a... wait for it, you'll never guess. A domestic terrorist. My quest log helpfully labels this a profound revelation. Lorenzo is ecstatic when I report back. Turns out he's using this case to establish precedent for his Psycho Hazard task force. With no more leads but one unexplored path, an abandoned highway crawling with enemy mechs, I press on. Why? Not from duty or a desire for justice, but because I get to pilot a giant robot and create increasingly elaborate crime scenes. That's Psycho Patrol, baby. So we return to the abandoned highway, and honestly, it's not that bad. Maybe it's the rotary cannon from earlier, but I managed to cut through all the enemy mechs on the abandoned highway before navigating over the unstable area that is the highway. After passing through to the next area, we come to what seems to be a national park, kind of reminiscent of Zion from the Fallout New Vegas DLC, that is also filled with enemy mechs at annoying angles and troops possessing weapons strong enough to pierce my armor. But through some trial and error and tricking the pathfinding, leading to them falling off the precarious pathways down below, giving me access to the next area, the countryside. It was here that I took a brief break from the SLS Panic investigation to explore the area. This area is essentially a large rural community with a gas station, a few fields, and a few random buildings. The main attraction is a big mansion guarded by security, owned by Hannes Lunk, the owner of Hannes Lunk Industrial Cleaning. I go up to the house and talk to the people inside. First, Lauren Lunk, Hannah's daughter, who really wants an actual horse. Not one of those human horses from the Human Animalization Foundation, but a real-life horse. Unfortunately for her, there are only like 5 actual horses alive in the world, and her father is nowhere near rich enough to afford one. Going down to talk to Hannes reveals this and says that he's on the waiting list for a human horse, but the list is quite long. This is where a dastardly plan starts forming, aided by some incriminating files I found on his computer upstairs. After dispatching all of his security, which for some reason he doesn't mind, and no one does in this game, it's weird. I go to him and ask him to turn himself into a human horse for his daughter. He obviously refuses, but I press the matter, revealing my evidence, but instead he continues to refuse, instead attempting to bribe us with all of his money, 100 grand, to not do this. Sadly, the idea of turning someone into a horse against their will is an exciting prospect for both me and my in-game character, who practically salivates over the idea in the quest log. So we return to Lorenzo and ask him for permission. He says that we can't force a law-abiding citizen to turn into a horse, but if we have evidence of him committing crimes, which we do, we can turn him into a horse. We show him the evidence we found on his computer of embezzlement or whatever crime he committed. I don't fucking know, I just want to turn this guy into a horse. And then Lorenzo agrees to send the Animalization Foundation after him. When we return to the countryside, we find Lauren in a nearby pen with her now horsified father, who, as a side note, looks absolutely horrific, as she celebrates owning a horse, saying that she loves her father very much for making this happen, even if he's gone away on a business trip. With this extremely necessary Psycho Patrol duty done, it's truly stuff like this that makes the job worth doing. We pass on to the next area, the swamp level, because of course there's a fucking swamp level, that I have a strange feeling will be where we can find the conclusion to our main quest. Continuing into the swamplands, the aptly named Wetlands, I'm greeted by a swamp that looks annoying as fuck to traverse. Just a side note, I fucking despise swamp levels. Every time I see a blight town or a swamp of rot, my skin boils because I know I'm in for soul-sucking, slow-movement, instant death bullshit. And this is no exception. Toxic buildup is guaranteed outside my V-Stalker, and half the time I get instantly deleted by something in the fog or dark. After trying the obvious path about 50 times, I try a different route and instead find a steep slope. Getting out of my mech and climbing up, I'm immediately shot at by heavily armed guards. Fortunately, after fighting the anti-cocaine task force for so long, I'm used to auto-aiming for headshots. I discover that this is a research facility for CERH. Not sure what they do, but I sense this is the final stop of my quest. If I have to spend one more minute in this toxic swamp, I'll turn myself into a human horse just to escape. So stepping into the facility, we're greeted by an industrial bunker that looks like something out of, I don't know, some bunker somewhere. There are 2 paths ahead of us, one through the main entrance where 3 armored guards await us, and sadly, I cannot flick between 3 heads before getting deleted, and a side path that's less guarded. We make our way through this side path, through the guards, dying several times but learning the spawn points each time until we make it to the last part of the bunker. A loop-around circle that seems to defy Euclidean geometry as we walk around the space. The entrance disappearing and enemies appearing, which we take care of, until eventually our final obstacle is a V-Stalker itself. Normally, we wouldn't be able to do shit against this without any specialized weapon, but fortunately for us, we picked up a machine gun that can cut through its enemy. So through some creative use of leaning, we managed to destroy it and pass through into the main chamber. A large chamber with a suspended circular device thingy, surrounded by 2 moving array type things. On the platform is 4 people, but we can only converse with the one inside the device. We ask what they're doing, and they tell us they're dedicated to the study of the Anima Mundi, or World Soul, a weak planetary force that nevertheless exerts great influence on the human biomass layer of the planet. They were also interested in the egregore, world brain theory, and sometimes even localized thought forms if they threaten to become too much to handle. When questioned further, they explain the chamber is actually a massive orgone accumulator. For our purposes, its primary function is the amplification of the planetary life force, so that we can better analyze the data. You can think of it as an inwards telescope pointed towards the core of Terra's soul. About the SLS panic specifically, they describe it as a localized thought form anomaly, when a localized thought form becomes strong enough to be accepted into the egregore. A localized thought form is, in simple terms, an emanation of the world's soul that affects a small amount of the population. Occasionally this will pick up enough speed to form a feedback loop back into egregore, which is basically blah 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 blah. It's all a bunch of babble, you don't really need to know about it. But most damning was the assessment of my boss. Lorenzo's PhD thesis? Don't get me wrong, he's clearly a clever man in his own right, but I've read his research and there's not a single page that doesn't take a massive leap of faith. He uses real scientific sources and terminology and matches them up as he sees fit. Obviously it has worked for him to advance his career and fame, but it's not science. I'm not a criminologist, but from what I know, it's barely even that. However, with this information that we understood maybe 5% of acquired, we return to Lorenzo with our findings. We walk up to him and click the dialogue option to tell him of this, and a cutscene plays of our player character turning around and walking out of the office, as text describes how, with this case set as precedent, the funding of Psycho Patrol and jurisdiction was lengthened, with the status of the framework of psychohazards firmly established. We walk back to our office, our colleagues look at us with admiration, saying stuff like, "Oh my god, is that him? And he's radiant." The text also describes how the leader of CEHRH, or Sir, I don't know, Jacob Grendel, who's the guy we just spoke to, despite his innocence, was charged with terrorism after our discoveries, and was turned into a human animal through forced animalization, and that Sir was folded into Psycho Patrol under the direct leadership of Lorenzo. The text continues to say that despite dissent, mostly from communists and other outlawed political actors, we are promoted to Anti-Psychohazard Inspector, the first of our kind, and given a sizable bonus and a raise. And with that, the main questline of Psycho Patrol comes to a close. And so does our time with the game. The ending left me with more questions than answers. Was Lorenzo using the concept of psychohazards to consolidate power? Was the SLS panic even real, or just a convenient excuse? Had I been the villain all along, punishing innocent researchers and turning civilians into horses for a corrupt system? When I first booted up Psycho Patrol R, I was fully prepared to hate it. Immersive sims tend to make my head hurt at the best of times, demanding a level of spatial awareness and tactical thinking that my lizard brain struggles with. And after my experience with Cruelty Squad, where I couldn't play for more than 40 minutes without feeling like my inner ear was being used as a paintball target, I expected more of the same migraine-inducing chaos. Yet somehow, against all odds, I ended up genuinely enjoying this deranged fever dream of a game. The core mechanics create a fascinating tension between vulnerability and power. On foot, you're fragile but agile, able to interact with the world in nuanced ways, bribing, conversing. In your V-Stalker, you're a walking tank, but one with limitations that prevent you from simply steamrolling through the game. This duality forces constant decision-making. Do I leave my mech to infiltrate this building, knowing a single bullet could end me? Or do I stay protected but unable to progress? This push-pull dynamic extends into every aspect of the gameplay. The rappel tool lets you access areas your V-Stalker can't reach, but using it means exposing yourself to danger. The sniper rifle offers lethal precision at a distance, but requires you to position yourself carefully and time your shots. Even something as simple as opening a door becomes a tactical decision. Do I breach quickly and hope to catch enemies off guard, or do I hang back and try to lure them out one by one? The ammunition economy is similarly brilliant in its cruelty. By making you pay for every bullet fired, the game discourages the spray and pray approach that's standard in most FPS games. Each firefight becomes a calculated risk assessment. Can I afford to engage here, or should I find another way around? And when you're already in debt, that calculation becomes even more desperate. It's elegant in its simplicity, yet profound in its impact on gameplay. I found myself conserving ammunition obsessively, reloading saves when I'd wasted too many shots, and feeling genuine anxiety when faced with multiple enemies. This is a game where missing a headshot doesn't just mean you might take damage, it means you're literally poorer for the experience. In what other game does basic resource management feel like both an economic simulation and a commentary on the privatization of law enforcement? The dialogue system deserves special mention too. Most games give you conversation options that are clearly signposted as good, evil, or neutral. Psycho Patrol R instead offers choices that all seem equally absurd or morally questionable. Do you want to ask about politics, cocaine, or selective breeding? None of these are correct choices, they're just different flavors of the game's uniquely disturbing worldview. The responses you get are equally unpredictable, ranging from earnest philosophical musings to paranoid conspiracies to enthusiastic endorsements of controlled substances. The difficulty, while often maddening, feels intentional rather than arbitrary. Psycho Patrol isn't difficult because of poor design, it's difficult because it wants you to feel overwhelmed, outgunned, and constantly on the back foot. It wants you to improvise, to exploit the system, to find creative solutions to seemingly impossible situations. Each victory feels earned precisely because failure is so common. That said, there were absolutely moments of pure, unadulterated frustration. The necropolis and the swamp sections in particular tested my patience to its breaking point. I died dozens, perhaps hundreds of times in these areas, often without understanding why or how I could avoid the same fate on my next attempt. The game doesn't always telegraph danger clearly, and sometimes it feels like you're being punished for not being psychic. But even these frustrations serve a purpose. They create a sense of genuine achievement when you finally overcome them. When I finally cleared the anti-cocaine task force section after what felt like the 100th attempt, I experienced a rush of endorphins comparable to beating a particularly difficult Souls boss. The game trains you to savor these victories because it makes them so hard to come by. Of course, being in early access, the game still has rough edges. Enemy AI can be inconsistent, alternating between superhuman accuracy and complete obliviousness. Quest objectives are sometimes frustratingly vague, leading to lots of aimless wandering. There are sections that feel unfinished or unbalanced, and occasional bugs that can break immersion, or worse, progression. The level design can also be hit or miss. When it works, it creates intricate spaces with multiple pathways and interesting vertical elements. When it doesn't, you get areas like the swamp. Confusing, visually monotonous stretches that feel more like punishment than play. I hope future updates will smooth out these rough patches without sacrificing the game's inherent weirdness and challenge. The visual style is worth mentioning too. While less aggressively stylized than Cruelty Squad, Psycho Patrol R still presents a world of unsettling textures, bizarre architecture, and incongruous visual elements. It's ugly in a very deliberate way, creating a sense of wrongness that perfectly complements the narrative themes. The sound design is similarly disorientating, with ambient noises that put you on edge and weapon sounds that vary from satisfyingly punchy to disturbingly organic. What Ville has created here is something genuinely unique. A game that doesn't just borrow elements from immersive sims, but pushes the genre in bold new directions. It's a game that trusts its players to figure things out, to fail repeatedly, and to eventually succeed through persistence and ingenuity. In an industry increasingly dominated by hand-holding and calculated mass appeal, there's something refreshing about a game that refuses to compromise its weird, challenging vision. Psycho Patrol R manages to be both a scathing satire and a legitimate addition to the immersive sim genre. It mocks corporate jargon, bureaucratic inefficiency, law enforcement overreach, and consumer culture, all while providing genuinely engaging gameplay systems. It's the rare game that has something to say beyond, here's some fun mechanics to engage with, even if what it's saying is deeply unsettling. The game drops you into the setting with minimal exposition, trusting you to piece together its internal logic through environmental storytelling and oblique dialogue. If there's one thing I hope gets expanded in future updates, it's the world building. The glimpses we get of Pan-Europa's social structure, the references to outlawed political movements, the casual mentions of mind-bending technologies. All of these hint at a richly realized dystopia that I want to explore more fully, preferably while turning fewer people into horses. Psycho Patrol R won't be for everyone. If you demand clear objectives, consistent rules, and a traditional power fantasy, you'll bounce off it harder than a bullet off Beast or Grama. But for those willing to embrace its peculiarities, to dive headfirst into its bizarre world of psychohazards and human horses, it offers an experience unlike anything else. In the end, maybe that's what stays with me most about Psycho Patrol R. In a medium increasingly filled with familiar experiences, it dares to be genuinely strange. It creates gameplay systems and narrative scenarios I've never encountered before, forcing me to think and play in new ways. And in doing so, it reminds me of why I fell in love with video games in the first place. The thrill of exploring unknown worlds, of learning unfamiliar rules, of experiencing something I couldn't possibly experience anywhere else. The $40 price tag might seem steep for an early access title, but if you're the kind of person who values originality above all else, who cherishes games that challenge conventional design wisdom, who appreciates art that makes you uncomfortable in service of something meaningful, then I'd argue it's worth every euro. Just be prepared to die. A lot. Or maybe I just really enjoyed turning that businessman into a horse. It's hard to say. Okay, well, I hope you did enjoy this video. But yeah, no, well, obviously, first of all, I'd like to thank the Patreons and the members of the channel. So that's the Milkman, a Roxano, Vinicus Franca, Ice Bear, and a Brick Wall. Thank you all so much for your support. But yeah, I did actually end up really enjoying this game. I didn't think I would, honestly. I remember I said I tried to play Cruelty Squad, and I might try and do a Cruelty Squad video after this. I don't know. I genuinely, I didn't make it up. It makes me motion sick. But I mean, I'm sure I could soldier through it, maybe. But yeah, no, yeah, it's a really good game. If you don't want to buy it yet because it's a lot of money for what it is right now, then that's fair. But I would try it at some point, definitely. Maybe wait a bit though, so there's more actual content in it. But yeah, make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. Mean the world to me if you do. It does help a lot more than anything it would. And number go up, make my dopamine go up. So, but yeah, let me know down below if there's any other games you'd like me to cover, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching again, and bye bye.